Just to have a look.
Oh, look. Oh, well, how beautiful.
Oh, that's nice.
That's lovely. Okay, now that's our weather report for this morning, and we'll invite Vilma to usher us into the gathering.
Good morning.
Morning.
Well, just something about Zoom etiquette. Just remember to stay muted unless you are participating in the sharing time or the words of commitment. And be aware that when your camera is on, you are always visible to everyone. Each Sunday, we begin our service by acknowledging that West Hill is on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations lands, which lands were previously occupied by the Seneca and Huron-Wendat First Nations. This place is and will continue to be home to Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes of the past and support true reconciliation in the present by engaging and celebrating our Indigenous community and moving forward together with kindness and respect. For those of you joining us from afar, we invite you to reflect on the personal relationships you might have with Indigenous nations where you live. Take the time to explore the history, the teachings, and the culture of our Indigenous brothers and sisters. Welcome to those living in the Scarborough area and in Ontario and across Canada, North America, the United Kingdom, Africa, and beyond. At this time, I would like to share an article that has appeared in the Toronto Star on Friday, July 23rd. And it's entitled Forgiveness, Key to Addressing Sins of the Past, written by Gaurav Jaswal. Now, he says, acknowledgement is the first step, and justice is necessary. This is just summarizing a bit of it. The wounds are rarely forgotten, but if you claw at them constantly, they will never heal. So this knee-jerk reaction of tearing down and defacing statues, burning churches, etc., has limited cathartic value. It causes more retaliation, or could cause. So you have the eye for an eye situation, and you know where that leads. What he says is forgiveness is the better healer and a powerful antidote for the poison of the past. And he cites Mandela as following this with his focus on unification when he got out of prison and then eventually became president. So you might want to read the whole article. It's quite interesting. And now we recognize the time, talents, and resources of At this time, we recognize and express deep appreciation for the support of West Hill's work given regularly by so many people in the form of their time, presence, energy, skills, and finances. If you would like to support the community and the work of West Hill in any of these ways, please contact the office. And that's westhillunited@gmail.com. Also, if you would like to receive our weekly e-blast, email the office at that email. Does anyone have any announcements to make? No? Well, if no one has an announcement, then Scott, I turn it over to you.
I've been doing a lot of digging into ideas, but also digging in my backyard to arrange a little winding path, which means I've had to dig deeper than before. And I was thinking of our the vision works work we're doing on being grounded. And I've read over and over and over, people have made this very cool observation, and I love that we've embraced it in our work here. That when we look around to find out what is real, what is true, as much as we can possibly figure out, we look out at the world, we look out at nature. I was just watching a documentary on whales. Look out into the world of nature, and the one thing it's incontrovertible, that's absolutely uncontestable, is that there is life, and that it appears to be interconnected. It appears to be impacted interrelatedly. The connections are myriad, and nothing lives in isolation. Nothing has not either been impacted or is doing some impact. And so we embrace that when we say we're grounded in life. It simply means that's where we look in different ways, from different perspectives and different backgrounds, fortified by different works that we've read, works that we have maybe embraced in the past and no longer embraced in the same way now. But we look to life for what is true, what is real, what happens. And that's just a fact. It comes to us as a fact. But when we look for how should we live, I don't think comes as a fact. I think it comes as a choice, because the human community, and even some of the sentient animal life that they're finding more and more, have figured out how to live together better. Not everyone figures it out, not everyone does it, but they figure out how to live together. And so we make a choice in this interconnected web. We make this choice to say, I wish to live this way. I would like to impact the world this way. I would like to respond when the world impacts me in this way. And so we choose, each of us chooses our own way of phrasing that, but we as a community have tried to keep choosing love as a way of acting. We do it well. We fall flat on our face as a group, individually in our lives, and get back up on our feet again and try to live to that ideal. So guided by love. And then growing in wisdom is so necessary. I don't know if we could take a toll of everyone on the screens today to look back in your life when you really wish you had chosen differently. You wish you had some wisdom that you didn't have then, or it was staring you in the face, but you were rejecting it, and now you're absorbing it. And that's because you've stayed with people, whether they're living people, whether they're people on these screens, whether they're people in books, but you're learning all the time how to love it. Sometimes by good examples, sometimes by bad examples, and we learn together. So grounded in life, big call. Choosing to be guided by love, bigger call. And growing in wisdom, as tough as that is, I'm just glad we do it together. And so I'm going to ask Sarah to lead us into our sharing time where those ideas can grow.
Did we want to have a song first, though?
Absolutely, because that's what I chose to do, and that's what I put on the outline, and that's what I just forgot to announce.
No, we planned it this way. So
absolutely, Peter. Thank you, Sarah.
To give from a heart of love, to live as a source of love, to see where there is need for love, and be what could help what I see there, to share more in the work of love, to bear more of the cost of love, to go where there is need for love, and know what could help what I find there. Oh, may this be the guide in my life. May this be my wisdom. True compassion, deep respect, given from a heart of love.
And now, sharing in the work of love and bearing in the cost of love, I would invite you to share the places in your life, in your community, and in the world that are in need of care, places that are hurting. And I would name in Toronto the encampments where those who have been living in tents have in recent days been evicted, and the concerns that that so many share, that there be both a solution for those who are homeless and underhoused, as well as a respect for the solutions people are finding temporarily, rather than the police force eviction of those individuals. So I name that as a place in our world in need of care. And I invite you to name those in your lives, or those that you're seeing in the community.
All the people fighting the fires that we're having in Canada and in the US, and the floods that they're having in Germany.
Yes. In this our time of need, may love abound.
The folks that are trying to keep the upswing in COVID numbers in the States down, and the stress of the misinformation about vaccines that people are struggling with. It's dividing families and friends and at all levels.
The people of Haiti, who have tried again and again to establish peace, order, and good government.
The Indigenous and First Nations communities that are struggling with the hard truths of the residential schools and the abuse of children, and a long history of neglect of these problems.
Absolutely. Are there other places that people want to name, other situations or concerns in your own life that you want to share in community?
People who are struggling with personal relationships.
Mm. Yes.
I'm concerned about the animals that are impacted by these fires.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, huge impact on creatures and ecosystems. Also hold space and invite us to take a few moments for the things that might be too difficult to say out loud, the things we're not ready to share openly, or even maybe to bring into conscious thought. But those might be the worries that keep you up at night, or the places in your stomach that feel like butterflies and not in a good way. So all of those difficult moments, let's hold some space together. In this our time of need, may love abound.
Love abound.
Love about.
And I would invite you now to name the sources of hope, the places where you see cause for celebration, the places that lift the burdens off your shoulders or the shoulders of others.
Yesterday, my husband Ian and I,
did a supervised visit for a guy who's going through problems with his relationship to take his 3.5-year-old daughter out.
Mm.
And within all his muddle and sort of anger and what have you about his relationship breakdown, the absolute joy and delight of being with a small person, seeing her leaping around in the play park and running across the fields and blowing out birthday cake candles and eating ice cream was just beautiful. I think the children bring us so much joy and energy in amongst all things.
What a tonic for a weary soul that would be, to spend
Indeed.
time with a little one.
Indeed.
I have excitement.
Oh, what's this?
This is the cover, final cover of my new book.
Of your new book? Oh, wonderful.
Yep.
Myra, that's so exciting.
Yes, it's because it takes so long to do it.
Indeed.
And next comes the final editing and we're good to go.
Well, congratulations in this
Thank you.
abundant blessing.
Thank you.
We share the joy.
Share the joy.
Boy,
I just want to add every doctor, every nurse practitioner, every nurse, every PSW, every recreational, every therapist, every occupational physiotherapist, every single one, not necessarily where I work, but in those places that are crunched, and they do it with devotion and evidently good humor as well. And so for everyone that's helping that environment, so to keep buoyant against the odds, that's what I want to honor as great hope.
I would add the social workers in there as well.
Yes.
Well, in all of these abundant blessings,
we
May
share
love
the
share the joy. Yeah.
and I know that Scott has a few words to share. Our the song that we'll hear next is Grateful, a love song to the world. And I see also that Scott is just coming right back from right back to the screen. So I will invite him to share a few words about this piece of music.
And I will do that, I promise, but I will also ask Peter to put the words of commitment which follow the sharing time. We had.
Oh yes, I skipped that.
That's okay. You may have skipped the screens. You do not skip those values, so that's good. So Peter, if you could lead us in that.
The earth is my home.
Home.
The
The world, my family.
family. World, my family.
As I live,
I live every day.
I want
I want to be a channel
for peace.
May I bring love where there
Where there is
hatred,
hatred
and
and
healing where there is
hurt.
Joy.
joy where there is
Where there
sadness,
is sadness.
and hope where there is fear.
I
I
Pray that
I
I may always
try
try to understand
and
and
comfort other people, as
as
well
well
as
as
seeking
seeking
comfort and
comfort and
understanding
understanding
from them.
from them.
Wherever
Wherever
possible, may I
I
choose
choose
to
to
be
be a light in the darkness,
help
help in times of need,
and a
and a
caring,
caring,
honest
honest
friend.
friend.
and may
And
justice
And may justice, kindness,
and
and peace
heart.
flow from my heart
forever.
forever.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Peter. For those of you that are maybe new and you hear these words being spoken in a different pace, I wanted to assure you that it is not that people are hesitating to commit themselves to these values as much as this is what happens on Zoom, is that the lag can be different. And so we hear it at different ways. I've kind of got to feeling it's a nice symbol of the diversity of hearts that are going into those words. So I want to just tell you a little bit about the song that you're going to hear. Here, if you're only on audio, but video, I see if you're on video as well. It's from a group. Greta is part of her work is not a part of her work. Part of her medical program is a meditation program, and this video came as part of it. And she sent it to me. She loved it so much, and I wanted to share it with West Hill as well. And you may have seen it already. It's produced by a group called Kind Spring, KINDSPRING, one word. Called A Global Movement of Kindness. And the song is written by Nemo Patel and Daniel Namad, who brought together dozens of people from around the world to create this song inspired by their 21-day gratitude challenge. And for 21 days, over 11,000 people from 118 countries sent in what they were grateful about. And how that impacted their life, and a bit of commentary about that. And this song came from it, and it's produced by a group called Empty Hands Music. And I wanted to add that just because of the impact they have. They're a nonprofit 100% gift offering company with an intention to spread seeds of goodness through its music, and it holds events and it has sharing times, as well as through its grassroots arts-based service work for underprivileged children in the slums of, and I might not say these right, Ahmedabad, Gujarat, India. So the whole thing is a gift and dedicated to the idea of gratitude. They on their website, they include a quote by Tolstoy that says, "Nothing can make our lives or the lives of other people more beautiful than perpetual kindness." So I invite you into this amazing video. And I think it'd be the kind you could share with friends too. Just send it around as many places as you could for them to enjoy that. So Peter, the song Grateful.
You're my life, you're my breath, you're a smile, you're my guest. You're the earth, you're the sun, you're the grass, you are love. You're my hands, you're a bug, you're my eyes, you're a hug. You're the light in the dark, you're the spark, you are fun. You're my mom, you are water, you're the stars, you're my daughter. You're my friend till the end, you're my dreams, you're my father. You're the ants on the ground, the miracles that surround. I'm feeling it all around, the hemisphere in the clouds. You're my pain, you're my sorrow, you're my hope for tomorrow. You're the strength when I'm hollow, you're the path that I follow. You're the blessings that exist, the small things that are bliss. The gift to realize that everything
all that
is a gift.
I am, all that I see, all that I've been, and all that I'll ever be is a blessing. It's so amazing, and I'm grateful for it all, for it all. Grateful for it
You're the blessings every time I try to count. You're the lessons that I learn every time I turn around. You're the water when I'm burned every time I think I found everything I'm looking for. You're the sign saying stop to take a bow and keep moving forward and start looking towards your heart. It'll open all the doors and only then you'll start to hear the world singing chorus with your mind and heart. Aligned in purpose, everything
all
will feel
that I
gorgeous.
am, all that I see, all that I've been, and all that I'll ever be is a blessing. It's so amazing, and I'm grateful for it all, for it all.
Every day day I sit and pray, cause what I have is more than I deserve or could ever imagine. How do I give back to all of this magic and spread the love so everybody can have it? Doesn't matter if I'm rich or poor, if I got a family or if I'm all alone. Bad things happen, I can just complain and moan, but there's a million things that I can be grateful for.
So I lift up my hands now, and I open my heart, and my gratitude goes out to everything near and far. All that I am,
And everything I see, everything I hope, and everything I dream, everything I feel, and everything I be. I look deep down and feel all the blessings. Everything I am, and everything I see, everything I hope, and everything I dream, everything I feel, and everything I be. I'm grateful for it all. It's amazing. Everything I am, and everything I see, everything I hope, and everything I dream, everything I feel, and everything I be. I look deep down and feel all the blessings. Everything I am, and everything I see, everything I hope, and everything I dream, everything I feel, and everything I be. I'm grateful for it all. It's amazing. You're the blessings that exist, the small things that are bliss, the gift to realize that everything is a gift.
Wait, one more. This is for y'all.
all that I am.
All that I see.
All that I've been.
It's a blessing.
It's so amazing.
I am grateful
Brilliant.
Mm. That was beautiful, really beautiful. Thanks, Scott, for bringing that to us. There are two readings today. The first one from Margaret Whitley's book, Turning to One Another, Simple Conversations to Restore Hope for the Future. As we work together to restore hope to the future, we need to include a new and strange ally, our willingness to be disturbed, our willingness to have our beliefs and ideas challenged by what others think. No one person or perspective can give us the answers we need to the problems of today. Paradoxically, we can only find those answers by admitting we don't know. We have to be willing to let go of our certainty and expect ourselves to be confused for a time. We weren't trained to admit we don't know. Most of us were taught to sound certain and confident, to state our opinion as if it were true. We haven't been rewarded for being confused or for asking more questions rather than giving quick answers. We've also spent many years listening to others, mainly to determine whether we agree with them or not. We don't have time or interest to sit and listen to those who think differently than we do. It is very difficult to give up our certainties, or positions, or beliefs, or explanations. These help define us, They lie at the heart of our personal identity. Yet, I believe we will succeed in changing this world only if we can think and work together in new ways. Curiosity is what we need. We don't have to let go of what we believe, but we do need to be curious about what someone else believes. We do need to acknowledge that their way of interpreting the world might be essential to our survival. We live in a dense and tangled global system. Because we live in different parts of this complexity, and because no two people are physically identical, we each experience life differently. It's impossible for any two people to ever see things exactly the same. You can test this out for yourself. Take any event that you've shared with others, a speech, a movie, a current event, a major problem, and ask your colleagues and friends to describe their interpretations of that event. I think you'll be amazed at how many different explanations you'll hear. Once you get a sense of diversity, try asking even more colleagues. You'll end up with a rich tapestry of interpretations that are much more interesting than any single one. To be curious about how someone else interprets things, we have to be willing to admit that we're not capable of figuring things out alone. If our solutions don't work as well as we want them to, if our explanations of why something happened don't feel sufficient, it's time to begin asking others about what they see and think. When so many interpretations are available, I can't understand why we would be satisfied with superficial conversations where we pretend to agree with one another. The next reading is entitled Reporting Back to Queen Isabella by Lorna Goodison. When Don Cristobal returned to a hero's welcome, his caravels corked with treasures of the New World, he presented his findings, told of his great adventures to Queen Isabella, whose speech set the gold standard for her nation's language. When he came to Jamaica, he described it so: the fairest isle that eyes ever beheld. Then he balled up a big sheet of parchment, unclenched, and let it fall off a flat surface before it landed at her feet. There were massives, high mountain ranges, expansive plains, deep valleys, one he'd christened for the Queen of Spain, overabundance of wood, and over 100 rivers, food and fat pastures for Spanish horses, men, and cattle. And yes, Your Majesty, there were some people. Offered as wisdom for the journey.
May we walk.
May we all walk in
That's
its light.
right.
Thank you, Vilma, for sharing in these readings. I feel so much the importance of curiosity, and I had shared part of the Margaret Wheatley reading at a recent board meeting. The invitation to being curious about perspectives that are different than our own. I first came across that poem by Lorna Goodison in February of last year, in the before times. I went to see Padraig Ó Tuama speak. He's an Irish poet, and it feels significant to me that the last person I heard reading me a poem in person was Ó Tuama, who is such an inspiration to me. Most of his talk was poetry, which is the kind of thing I can get behind. I find that preparing to write is mostly me reading poems out loud and then hoping to transmit the feeling from my heart to your ears. Lorna Goodison wrote about Christopher Columbus, about his dramatic reporting on the lands he'd visited and his utter disregard for the human lives that would be destroyed by the presence of colonizers. That last line, and yes, there were some people, hits hard. I'm 44 years old, and when I was in school, we still learned things through the lens of the doctrine of discovery, that European explorers discovered the Americas, and without them, we wouldn't have the good things in society and culture that we value. There was very little shared about how this discovery led to devastation and loss in my experience of at least the earlier years of education. Now, Patrick Otuma is Irish himself, and he speaks as well about the impact of occupation and colonization. He, in speaking about Goodison's poem, says, "There's something important for me in being Irish, in knowing the contemporary politics of Ireland is utterly shaped by the history of the past centuries of British presence in Ireland. And I'm always sustained by people from other parts of the world who know that you can't speak about politics today without knowing the long ache and wound and desecration that colonization brings. And colonization doesn't end when the colonizing country decides to leave. There's a theory in conflict resolution that conflicts take as long to de-escalate as they took to escalate. And I think that anybody from a colonized or previously colonized country knows this, and knows that just because whoever they were have gone, doesn't mean that things have returned to the way that they should be or could have been. You're going to live with the impact of this for a very, very long time, and possibly forever. My own perspective, of course, has shifted from the childhood understanding of the goodness of this discovery and the cooperation of Indigenous people and colonizers to a place of longing to undo and fix the harm done by colonization. And now to a place of sitting with the reality that for my lifetime, and likely much longer, there will be reckoning and finding ways to live with these and many other places of pain in the world. Christy Belcourt, the Métis artist who Scott referenced a few weeks ago, points out the connections between colonization and resources, and specifically residential schools and resource extraction, saying, how many Canadians understand the direct intent of kidnapping, abuse, murder, and assimilation training of Indigenous children was so that there would be unfettered access to Indigenous lands and resources? And of those who do, how many support land back? What does it mean for us to decolonize our lives, our churches and institutions, and our country? There are many difficult stories that we need to hear, and much deep listening that we are called to undertake. Margaret Wheatley, in her writing about change and community together, describes how we move from a place of knowing and certainty to a place of curiosity. She describes the process of sitting with questions, and especially sitting with discomfort. There are many ways to sit and listen for the differences. Lately, I've been listening for what surprises me. What did I hear that startled me? And this isn't easy. I'm accustomed to sitting, nodding my head to those things that I agree with. But when I notice what surprises me, I see my own views, including my beliefs and my assumptions. A few years ago, I worked for a church on the Danforth, which is a busy street in Toronto. And there was a shooting there 3 years ago. And in the month that followed, a street festival that happened annually. And my colleagues and I set up conversation pools that were plastic waiting pools with chairs around them. And we were inspired by Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, and his very simple act of sitting with Francois Clemens, Officer Clemens, in that iconic image of the two of them, a white man and a black man together with their feet in the pool, as a response to racism that persisted in post-segregation America. That still continues. We had questions written on floating rubber ducks and invited people to sit and get to know neighbors, strangers, whomever they were paired with. A couple sat down and shared with me that they were on their third date and giggled and told stories of their adventures thus far and their hopes. A man sat and told me he used to think the earth was flat, that growing up, that's what he was told. And it wasn't until he was in an airplane and looked out the window that he started to think that may not be the case. Others argued with me about religion and gay rights. And so it wasn't a blissful experience like what Mr. Rogers and Officer Clemens had, but it was significant to hear the stories of strangers. We don't have as many spaces right now for that powerful experience of listening to those who might have different perspectives, different experiences. But those days will come again. One of the strategies that I have found is reading books that I wouldn't normally read. If you're familiar, many experiences of online shopping will say, if you like this, you'll like that. That keeps you in a circle of reading and exploring in places that may be deeply satisfying to you, but not particularly challenging. Human minds are built or have evolved to process stories. Our brains retain information better when we hear a story, and our emotional response to storytelling is a significant and profound part of the experience of being human. We come to understand and retain knowledge through stories, certainly for me, much more than I do with a list of facts, as Scott and I were discussing before we started, that one of us can remember the books of the Bible and one of us would have to scramble if that was part of our service. Jag Bala writes about how we relate to stories, saying, like our language instinct, a story drive, an inborn hunger for story hearing and story making emerges untutored in children. Jonathan Gottschall writes about how stories offer feelings that we don't have to pay the full cost for. They are simulated experiments in people physics, freeing us from the limits of our own direct experience. I think as one who has, as an older sister and as a parent or a friend, tried to share a story so you don't have to go through the same experience, that while a story can give us the experience, sometimes we do have to learn those lessons for ourselves. There are also stories we tell ourselves to define our experience as distinct and different, to tell ourselves that troubles we see elsewhere couldn't happen here, that those who are suffering are different, the walls that we build to avoid facing the truth of our own fragility and vulnerability. I like this stanza from Robert Frost's poem called Mending Wall. He says, before I build a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in or walling out, and to whom I was likely to give offense. Something there that doesn't love a wall wants it down. A wall tells a story, a fence marks a border and outlines a distinction between here and there, between mine and yours, between safety and danger. In one of my favorite podcasts, Krista Tippett's On Being, she often interviews people and sometimes in pairs. And I particularly like when she interviews people with very different points of view, offering the possibility of breaking down walls and even building bridges. Her interview with Sally Cohen and Eric Erickson, political figures on opposite sides of American politics, was called Relationship Across Rupture. And Erickson, author of a conservative blog and a host of a conservative radio show in Atlanta and contributor to Fox News, presented a particular perspective that I wouldn't admittedly often listen to. Sally Cohen is a columnist and commentator on CNN, and she wrote a book entitled The Opposite of Hate, a field guide to repairing our humanity. Their discussion felt worth listening to and spoke to the importance of building relationships across divisions. And I'll share a story from both of them. This is from Sally Cohen. She says, I'll give a practical tip and a challenge. The practical tip is that we know from neuroscience, when people sense an argument, their brain shuts down. The persuasion part of their brain shuts down and the fight or flight lights up. They pick a side. No one's going to pick your side. It's by definition of an argument. So the person that you're arguing with is going to pick their side. Then the whole thing breaks down and everybody leaves feeling pretty crummy about things. So the extent to which we can keep things conversational, and also if you want to persuade someone else, you have to be open to being persuaded yourself. These are two-way streets. They have to be. And you can't be faking it. You have to really authentically, meaningfully be hearing what the other person is saying, not waiting for your turn to volley back. And the other is, we have something about the way in which our lives and our communities are segregated. This is increasingly ideological. It's also racial, economic, and it's very interesting about, as she says, the gay thing, because you have these stealth gay people. I was one, were dormant in my family the whole time, and suddenly, surprise, I'm gay. And they already liked me, so it worked out well. And that's why we've had such good progress on gay rights as a country. That doesn't happen, for instance, with Black people or Muslims. Your cousin doesn't suddenly one day come out as Mexican. But there are also studies about kids who go to racially segregated elementary schools, and they grow up to have less racial bias. College students who participate in racially integrated activities and after-school programs actually reduce their racial bias. There is something about knowing each other, being together, relating to each other that has a much more positive effect more broadly. The challenge to hear is real. I've been in those meetings where I'm building my argument, I'm not taking in much of what the other is saying. And I've started to see those moments as an invitation to ask my heart to stay open, to remember this person is beloved. Here is Erik Erikson, who I expected to completely disagree with. And he speaks about, he speaks as a Christian person. So he's saying, I'm always struck to some degree about the first bad thing in Scripture. What's the very first bad thing that happens in Genesis? It's not Cain and Abel, it's not the fall or the serpent or the apple. It's actually in the Garden of Eden, before evil enters the world, when God says it is not good for the human to be alone. That's the first bad, loneliness. So many of us concoct relationships and communities, and yet we feel alone. We get into our tribes, Republican, conservative, liberal, progressive, Democrat, and then that becomes alone and insulated. We don't mix and mingle with the other. And when you don't mix and mingle with the other, it's a lot easier to believe the other is the enemy. And so I push myself more and more to make sure I'm actually having physical interactions with other people. And he describes in his own story with a wife who has cancer, I know we're running out of good years. And I'm more and more mindful of the fact that it really is necessary for people to have actual real friends. And I don't think it's a coincidence at all that we both began having these internal conversations with having kids at the level of, and I don't mean local, it's not intentional, but it's community. physical, real, break bread community. And he describes the piece that he really speaks to, which is inviting people to your home to break bread. And that everyone should learn to cook in order to be able to open their doors and to invite their neighbors in. This, of course, being advice that we all wish we could follow. And I'm excited for the slow return to those days of cooking together and sharing meals in our homes. These are some of the ways that we hear the stories of those who are different and perhaps shift our own perspective. One important caveat, though, James Baldwin's quote is something that a lens that I also look through to inform my decisions and the way that I move through the world. And he says, we can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and the denial of my humanity and of my right to exist. And I think this is an important caveat when we are encouraging people to just get along or just be friends, that when the perspective of one involves the denial of the humanity of the other, that's a harder place to keep an open mind and an open heart. There are certainly perspectives that I don't have a lot of patience for, and voices that I wish I could silence. Those spreading misinformation about vaccines right now are some of them. Those trying to limit reproductive rights, those spouting hate, those calling for harm. But it is my hope that we can turn fences into tables in our lives, and in those places find space to change our own minds, space to open our hearts, and also space to sit with those who think differently, maybe even to love those differences. I have a final poem for you to conclude. This is by Christian women, and it's entitled, All My Friends Are Finding New Beliefs. This one converts to Catholicism, this one to trees. In a highly literary and hitherto religiously indifferent Jew, God whomps on like a genetic generator. Paleo, keto, zone, South Beach, bourbon. Exercise regimes so extreme, she merges with the machine. One man marries a woman 20 years younger, and twice in one brunch uses the word verdun. Another's brick-fisted belligerence gentles into dementia. And one, after a decade of financial feints and teases like a sandpiper at the edge of the sea, decides to die. Priesthoods and beasthoods, sombres and glees, high-styled renunciations and avocations of dirt, sobrieties, pilgrimages to the very bowels of being. All my friends are finding new beliefs, and I am finding it harder and harder to keep track of new gods, new loves, the old gods and the old loves, and the days that have daggers, the mirrors, motives, the planets turning faster and faster in the blackness, and my nights and my doubts and my friends, my beautiful, credible friends. So may you have beauty in the change, the surprise, the transformations that you see around you. Thank you.
If we could just take a few moments just to reflect quietly together from that, the message of perspectives, the perspectives on perspective. So first of all, thank you, Sarah, for the wisdom in that, the personal wisdom and the wisdom you glean from writings that have meant a lot to you. I heard a statement that said once, the definition of a good sermon is it goes over your head into the head of the person that's sitting behind you who really needs to hear it. And now this can't happen on Zoom, you see, because no one's sitting behind us. We're all on a flat screen. So we must take in the whole message and chew on it ourselves. So I wanted to if you have your gallery view is where you see everybody, right? Yeah, if you have your gallery view. You don't have to do this, but I just wanted to see a raise of hands. If there's anybody on the screens that over their lifetime has thought a certain way, knew that you were absolutely right, and then through somebody or some writing or some experience found that you now think very differently about whatever that is. If you could just signal that, I'm going to put both my hands up. If you've come to a point in your life where you think differently than you used to, yes. I wonder if we could take a moment, if anyone would like to unmute and just name, you can name the person if you want, if that's not divulging too much, or a writer, a song, a person that actually made, you might not even say who it was, but that made a significant change in how you saw someone differently than you did before, how you were able, as Sarah said, I love that phrase, Sarah, turning fences into tables. I hadn't heard that one. That's such a, I don't know, you usually hear take the fence down, but this was turn it into a table, which I'm assuming is the idea of fellowship and talking and exchanging ideas.
Well, yes. And, I'm really big on DIY upcycling. So that's,
oh,
you might really use the wood from your fence to make a table too.
So is there anyone that would just like to share? We just got a few moments, something that really made an impact in you, in your life, that you saw differently and you're glad you did. And it may have even been rough. I'm listening to Sarah and I'm thinking in my own life right now, just, penetrating a couple of those penetrating lines of that. I need to think more on this. I need to address this more. So is there anyone share someone, a source that changed your mind for the better? Just jump right in.
Larry Marshall, Lloyd Gearing.
Both.
The first time I could actually discuss the realities of the history of religion was a wonderful break point for me.
Joseph Campbell, listening to his stories.
Jack Spong.
Greta Vosper.
I first read Jack Spong in a truck stop on a long trip I took by myself and kept thinking, why didn't anyone tell me this? Why didn't anyone tell me this? Why didn't anyone tell me this? And I went to seminary, for goodness sake. So
that's right. That's right.
Well, that's exactly where they're not going to tell you that. Although now, yes.
I didn't know that at the time. I thought I was going to get the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
No.
Anyone else?
No.
Anyone else? A writer or a song even?
I just wanted to mention a friend of mine that only Anne will have any knowledge of, and that is Willie Storm, who was a member of the church we went to many, many years ago. And he introduced me first to the Brandt report about the inequity between the northern or developed economies and the southern economies. And that was an eye-opener for me, the start of eyes being opened wide to other things that I had never seen before.
Right. I didn't see if Ruth Gill is on the line today. Oh, she is. She's just not seeing. I have to say, West Hill and its emphasis on Indigenous peoples, I did not know hardly and comparatively nothing about the atrocities until West Hill featured them and brought them to front and center and to light. And that has changed so much of my thinking about people, about our country, and about what would be my responsibility. So that's a major influence.
I can tell you something.
Okay.
I grew up in a small community in Ontario. We had two churches in town. One was United, one was Presbyterian. Huge differences, of course, between them. They hardly talked to each other. In fact, the United Church was built because it split from the Presbyterian at the time of the Union.
Yep.
So that was a perspective in which I grew up. My first real experience in the outside world was working as a dishwasher at a Jewish summer resort. What an eye-opener. Jews didn't have tails. They were human. They were wonderful. They were knowledgeable. They were patient. They listened. And after I worked there for a couple of summers, I discovered that they tipped very generously.
Good things to have learned as a youngster. They often say that just travel in general bashes into so many ideas you didn't know you were holding, and the travel itself, you're never quite the same when you come back and have seen something different, people different. You're right. Anyone else before I ask my last question?
As a teenager, I attended the United Church Camp Quinmalack near Madoc. And there I met, I don't know whether any of you would be around to know, he was called Padre of the Pubs, Reverend Griffin. He actually came from Port Perry originally, and he was converted from being a rousy teenager to United Church minister. And his views certainly started me on a travel to discover so many things. And, it was just something I had never experienced before I listened to him and had a chance to talk with him. It was a great experience.
Excellent. Fran, I saw you unmute. Were you going to share something?
Well, I just wanted to say that probably the book that gave me the biggest influence or biggest change, if you like, was The Color Purple by Alice Walker. When she raised the question of, well, God is an it.
Right.
I love that. I love that. Life-changing.
A brave author. So I know you're going to think of things afterwards, but I would just like to take what Sarah has said and ask us just to take a moment without sharing this. If there is an issue, a person, a conversation, a conflict, a block, an obstacle, I know I'm thinking of them myself in your life, that this focus today would invite you into opening up, where it feels much better to be tightly closed because you know you're right, or because other people have told you you're right too, so you're just so right. And if we could open that up, if maybe using the recycling model of taking the fence and making it into a table and extending it, which just doesn't mean the other person will respond and come to the table. There's no guarantee with that, but that you're offering that table even within yourself. You're not closed anymore. So I'm just going to take a moment. You can close your eyes or shut your screen off or whatever, but just so that the message doesn't go over our heads into the head of the person sitting behind us. Just take a moment to maybe apply that just quietly, and then we'll say goodbye for the day. And so I would ask you, whatever you're thinking there, if you need help with that, everyone's invited to phone Sarah all week long and respond to the message in a personal way and expect, well, would you give each one of them a couple of hours every day, Sarah? Okay, if that's all right with you.
But next week, because I'm on vacation this week. So should you have thoughts, you can by all means send them to me, and I will respond to you, and would be glad to chat the following week.
She has a table set for you. Yes,
I will. Yes, at a virtual table, and yes, I'm glad to hear about your knocking down of fences. Although if you have a dog, don't do that. Dogs do much better with fences. If your neighbor has a dog.
Yes. So thank you, Sarah, very, very much. Thank you, Peter, for your PowerPoint work. Glenn is at his or no, I think he's here, but we didn't set up at the church. Yep, there, didn't set up at the church today, but I thank him for all the work he does in between thinking. He is always thinking of how to make the sound better. And thank you for Babette for recording. Soon we're going to be recording in the building, which is going to be absolutely lovely. Soon, and thinking in the future without rushing to meet together. Although you far away people will always be in the room with us as long as you wish to be, which will be good to look forward to. Okay, thank you for being together on a sultry, oh, well, it's not the same weather in the same, whatever weather you're in. Thank you for being part of this community, which helps us remain and keep on being grounded in life and guided by love, and certainly together growing in wisdom. Thank you. Have a great week. See you Tuesday for wellness, Thursday for Coffee with Mike. That's what I've started calling it now, Coffee with Mike. He hosts so beautifully. And then next week's a long weekend, but whoever's around or wishes to join us, we'll see you then. Take care.
Thank you.
Farewell.
Thank you, Scott. Bye.
Thank you, Scott.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.